This unlucky kid gets smoked by Truck-kun and wakes up in a wild-ass isekai world packed with chaos and magic. He thinks he's just some regular dude, but deep down, he's got a hidden trait that makes him straight up immortal. On top of that, there's some mysterious magic buried inside him. But it ain't waking up on its own, he's gonna have to grind through brutal training in a world crawling with deadly beasts. The story kicks off in a medieval-style isekai world, where a high schooler named Ryo is laid out flat inside a quiet, empty cottage. The place is bare, no furniture, nothing on the walls, just 2 old books and a knife sitting on a dusty table. Ryo gets up without even glancing at them, steps outside, and takes a breath of fresh air, looking around to find himself surrounded by nothing but towering mountains stretching as far as the eye can see. He stares at his own hands, then casually whispers, "Water, come forth," and sure enough, a little ball of water pops into existence and splashes gently in his palm. All of this began a few days earlier, when Ryo suddenly woke up inside a strange white void. No walls, no ground, just endless emptiness. Before he could freak out, a calm voice reached him, and an angel appeared right in front of him, reading his mind like it was written on a board. The angel reassured him that this wasn't the afterlife, though it definitely looked the part, and said it had been years since anyone passed through. At the same time, he gave Ryo some bad news: he had died, hit by none other than the infamous Truck-kun. Ryo, somehow not surprised, accepted it without a fight and figured out what was coming next. He was getting reincarnated. In his mind, he nicknamed the angel Michael and asked him what he should do in his next life. Michael, with a laid-back smile, told him to live however the hell he wanted. Ryo had always dreamed of living a slow and boring life, and once he got the green light, he got ready to start fresh in a brand new world full of magic, named Phi. Before sending him off, Michael gave him the rundown. In the world of Phi, only about 20% of people can use magic, and lucky for Ryo, not only can he use it, he's also got the strongest compatibility with the water element. Since he asked for peace and quiet, Michael placed him in the forest of Rondo, alone in a small cottage, where he could take it easy. The angel stocked a nearby ice house with 2 months' worth of food and left 2 books inside the cottage, one about the local plants, the other about monsters. As for magic, he reminded Ryo that it's all about imagination and training. No fancy rules, no chance required. And for now, there's no danger. Michael threw up a barrier around the place to keep forest monsters out. Now, Ryo gives water magic another go, and, with a little focus, conjures up a floating ball of water. No chant needed this time, which is pretty damn convenient for a main character. Ryo uses his magic to fill the bathtub with water. Though to be honest, the idea that it came from somewhere inside him feels kinda gross if you think about it too much. The water's freezing, so he needs to figure out how to heat it up. And for some reason, he goes for the oldest, most useless method known to man trying to light a fire with sticks. He keeps rubbing and failing until he gives up, and starts thinking if there's a smarter way to get this done with magic. Pulling from his old chemistry lessons, he separates hydrogen from oxygen, which ends up freezing the water instead, turning it into solid ice. Now, with a chunk of ice in hand, he decides to try something different. He uses it like a magnifying glass, focusing the sunlight through it. And to his surprise, it actually works. He gets fire. With the fire going, Ryo heats the water and sinks in like he's been waiting his whole damn life for this moment. As he relaxes, everything in his mind starts clearing up, and it finally hits him that he could have just used magic to create hot water by reversing the process he used to make ice. But that's something to try later. For now, it's dinner time. While he eats, it hits him that the food stocked in the ice house isn't going to last forever. And if he doesn't start hunting soon, he's gonna be in trouble. The thought of going into the forest makes him pause though, because he knows monsters are out there, and he sure as hell won't survive with that tiny knife Michael left him. Which means it's time to figure out how to fight with magic. The next morning, he starts working on his first offensive spell, water ball, but when he fires it at a tree, it doesn't do a damn thing. So he tweaks the shape, tightening it into something like a sharp arrow, and after hours of trying, he finally manages to form a basic water jet. It's a cool step forward, but even that still doesn't leave a mark on the tree. The day after, he switches over to ice magic, hoping it'll hit harder. He carefully forms a crystal but struggles to lift it, because ice just doesn't move like water. Still, after a long day of grinding, he finally manages to summon multiple crystals and get them hovering in place, but he's still not able to launch them at the target. After a bunch of messy attempts and frustrating fails, he finally gets to a point where he can summon ice crystals in a flash. Trouble is, he still can't launch them with enough power to use in a real fight. But time's not on his side, so he figures he'll make do. He sharpens one like a spear and heads out into the forest, hoping for the best. Down near a quiet riverbank, he stumbles on some quartz and feels like he just struck gold. If his mana ever dries up, this might be his backup to light a fire. Not long after, while picking herbs, a wild boar locks onto him and charges straight ahead. Ryo freezes in place, too scared to move, and for a second, it looks like his second life's about to be cut real short. But that gut-deep fear of dying again kicks in, and he dives out of the way just in time. Thinking quick, he turns the ground to ice. The boar slips hard, and right then he throws up a few sharp icicles. One solid hit and the thing goes down. Not bad, though it's clear he's still got a long road ahead. Later, back at the cabin, he checks out the monster compendium. Turns out that boar he took down was a total weakling, barely ranked as a threat. That hits him kinda hard, but he keeps flipping through the pages. If the easy monsters in this world nearly kill him, what the hell happens when the real ones show up? And then comes the dragon entry. The book straight up says if you ever see one, just run. It won't help, but run anyway. Then he flips to the page on Akuma. Turns out it's even more terrifying. It says you don't need to run, you just need to pray you never see one. Real encouraging stuff. The book's doing a crap job at making him feel prepared, but he keeps reading, and despite everything that happened, he doesn't back down. The next morning, Ryo heads out again, ready for whatever the day throws at him. Things start off decent. He finds a fruit tree and takes a bite, and damn, it's good enough to make him forget all the stress from yesterday. But that piece doesn't last. Out of nowhere, an assassin hawk dives at him and knocks him flat. He instantly knows he's outmatched. The bird's packing invisible air magic, so dodging or blocking is a total joke. He remembers something from the monster book and makes a run for it. But how the hell is he supposed to outrun a flying beast? With nowhere to go, he plants his feet and fights back. Hits it dead on with ice magic, and when it crashes, he thinks it's over. As he gets closer though, the damn thing bursts out of the ice injured. Yeah, but still alive. One of its eyes got messed up, and maybe that's what makes it back off. The hawk finally flies off, and Ryo hits the ground, exhausted and grumbling that this quiet life is anything but quiet. After that mess, he tries to head home, only to realize he's completely lost. While stumbling around the woods, he spots something creepy, a Dullahan. No head, smoke pouring from its neck like it's puffing cigarettes non-stop, and it's just calmly grooming its horse. Somehow, Ryo manages to make it back. Days go by and he keeps training, fighting random monsters, catching fish, refining his water magic until it's sharp enough to slice through a mountain. He's finally getting the hang of this world. Still, every night, he heads back to that same spot where the Dullahan hangs out, not to win, but maybe to grow. There's nothing about Dullahans in his monster book, so either it's not a monster or it's too rare to be in the beginner's guide. After another rough fight, Ryo realizes he's not showing up just to prove something. He starts thinking maybe the Dullahan's been trying to help him get stronger this whole time. That night, the creature forms a sword out of ice and holds it out without a word. Ryo looks at it, gets the message, and takes it. As soon as he does, the Dullahan turns around and walks off, disappearing without a sound. The days roll by with nothing major happening, at least until that damn hawk shows up again. Ryo's out training like usual when he spots it in front of him. It's got one eye missing, so he knows right away it's the same one he fought before. Thing is, it wasn't black last time, and it sure as hell wasn't this big. Looks like the bastard evolved. The hawk charges at him with wild force, so Ryo throws up a 5-layer ice wall, but it smashes through without flinching. He stacks a 10-layer one, same result. Then he fires off an ice lancer, but the hawk dives right through it. As his walking stick drops, he grabs the sword he got earlier from the Dullahan and swings with everything he's got. It works. The hawk staggers back, comes again, but this time he drives the blade straight through it. As it crashes down, he walks up slow, looking at the thing with a bit of respect. That bird wasn't giving up easy. Took its eye again, and it still kept coming. Truth is, it pushed him to grow stronger, so in a way, he's thankful. Since it evolved just to face him again, he lets it die by his hand. After that, he moves along without knowing a dragon's been watching nearby. When it finally shows up and speaks, he's stunned he can hear it. The dragon seems relieved too, now able to use telepathy again. It asks if he's seen an evolved hawk, and when Ryo says he killed it, the dragon gets curious. Ryo shows him the sword, and the dragon immediately recognizes it as the sword of the Fairy King. That stirs more questions. The dragon asks what he did to earn that blade, but Ryo doesn't have a clue. With his curiosity satisfied, Ryo asks a few things too. They chat for a while until the dragon decides it's time to go. Before taking off, Ryo introduces himself, and the dragon replies with his name Lewin. Ryo's been living it up in this new world, having such a chill time that the angel who reincarnated him decides to check his slab again. That's when he notices something he totally missed the first time. Turns out, Ryo's got a hidden feature the last person didn't. He was born with the power of eternal youth. Meanwhile, back by the riverbank, a boy with red hair lies in the sand, looking like the next piece of this story is about to begin. Later on, Ryo starts craving seafood, so he heads down to the beach and ends up stumbling across a shipwreck. He spots a guy lying near the wreck, but after checking him out, it's clear he didn't make it. Then out of nowhere, he hears someone groaning, and for the first time since he got to this world, his eyes light up. Finally, another human. The guy's name is Abel, and he's stuck replaying what happened. Some giant octopus-looking thing attacked their ship during a storm, and next thing he knows, he's sinking fast. But when he wakes up, he's in Ryo's place, confused but alive. Right away, he gets up and starts looking around for the others. He steps outside and gets hit with more confusion, because this place looks nothing like anywhere he knows. While he's still trying to figure it out, Ryo shows up behind him. Abel's shocked, not just because he didn't sense him even though he's trained for stuff like that, but also because of how the guy's dressed. Still, he keeps it to himself for now. He thanks Ryo for saving him, and Ryo tells him straight he only managed to save one. The rest were already gone. Abel shrugs it off and says they were smugglers anyway, but before he can say more, his stomach starts making noise. Ryo tells him they'll talk over food and leads him back inside. While eating, Abel can't help himself. He finally brings up the clothes. Ryo says it's all he's got, no fabric around to make more. Abel suggests buying some but stops short, realizing maybe the guy's just broke. Ryo clears it up, says there's no one else around to buy from even if he had the money. Abel then asks if Ryo hunts his own food. He nods, points at the knife, but Ryo flexes with a bit of water magic, saying that's how he does most of it. That gets Abel's attention. Turns out only half the people in this world can use magic, and he's in the half that can't. That surprises Ryo, since the angel told him only about 20% could. Either way, Abel says he needs to head to the shore, wants to check something out for himself. While they're walking, Abel tells Ryo to let him handle the front if they run into trouble. Ryo says there's no need, but Abel insists he doesn't want to be the guy always getting saved. Ryo shrugs and tells him to do what he wants. When they get to the wreck, all the bodies are gone. Abel figures the sea or some monsters dragged them away. He thanks Ryo again, knowing he'd be in that pile too if not for him. He says he didn't find what he was looking for, and now he's thinking about reuniting with his crew. The storm must have dragged them way south, and he's got no clue which way to head. Then it hits him. He turns to Ryo and asks if he'd want to tag along. Ryo's caught off guard, and Abel adds that having him around would help him find his way back. And once they get there, he'll help Ryo land a decent job and live better. Ryo thinks it over for a while. Eventually, he agrees to be Abel's guide back to the city. Later that evening, Ryo stands by his garden, staring at the patch he spent so much time building up. There's a hint of sadness in his eyes as he thinks about leaving it all behind. That night, he tells Abel he's heading out to say goodbye to someone. The knight's clearly curious, but keeps it to himself and lets him go. At the lake, Ryo finds the knight Dullahan waiting. He tells him he's leaving the forest for a long while and thanks him for all the training. Then he draws his knife and says he's going all out tonight. The knight draws his sword in return, and the fight kicks off. Ryo rushes in with everything he's got, pushing hard, forcing Dullahan on defense. It's a brutal back and forth, and by the end, Ryo's running on fumes. The knight returns to the water silently, but just as he reaches the lake, he turns around and pulls a magical armor suit from beneath the surface, offering it to Ryo as a parting gift. Ryo gets all emotional, thanks him again, and heads back. By morning, both Ryo and Abel are ready to hit the road. As they take off, Ryo glances back at the forest he called home, and a wave of nostalgia hits him hard. Not long after, they run into a wild boar in the woods, and Abel tells Ryo to let him take care of it. He charges straight at the thing, sword out, then pulls off some slick combat move that turns the poor boar into a meat donut. Ryo's standing there impressed, asking what the hell that was. Abel tells him it's called a combat skill, something folks who fight with weapons rely on. They crash for the night inside a hollow tree, then get moving again the next morning. While trekking through the woods, they spot some lizardmen hanging around a swamp. Abel doesn't want to mess with them, says they're pretty damn strong, so they switch up the route. But Ryo can feel something off. Those lizard freaks are tailing them. Abel preps for a fight, but Ryo steps in, saying there's too many, and he's gonna use magic. Abel figures Ryo can't do much without a staff, but then his jaw nearly hits the ground when Ryo fires off 4 icicle lances like it's nothing, wiping out a chunk of the enemy. Once it's all over, Abel asks what kind of spell that even was. Ryo says it's just the regular icicle lance. Abel shakes his head, saying his wind mage buddies can only toss out 1 spell at a time, but this guy fired 4 in a blink. Ryo just shrugs it off, says maybe that's a wind magic issue, cause water magic works different. Abel figures there's no point thinking too hard about it and says they better keep moving. But first, Ryo makes 2 ice cups and fills them with fresh water. Abel picks up on a different chant this time, and Ryo plays it off, saying he probably heard it wrong before. They keep going, and somewhere along the way, Abel tosses Ryo a coin. Ryo lights up, saying it's the first time he's ever seen money. Abel's stunned, he thought the kid was broke. But this is next level. He starts giving Ryo a little rundown on the 3 big countries in the central provinces. There's the Kingdom of Knightley, the Debuhi Empire, and the Handelu Federation. Ryo can't help but clown on the name Debuhi, saying it sounds dumb as hell. He keeps going on about how goofy it sounds, talking trash the whole time, until they finally reach a wide clearing. Out of nowhere, they spot a rock shift on its own, and Abel reacts fast, slicing it clean in half. Ryo throws up a water shield just in time to block a wave of flying stones. And that's when Abel realizes they walked right into a damn nest of rock golems. Ryo's confused for a second, thinking golems were supposed to look more human. But Abel ain't got time to explain. He charges at the closest one and blasts a hole straight through it. The thing doesn't even flinch though, patches itself right back up and keeps swinging. Abel backs off, saying their attacks aren't doing much. But Ryo's already cooking up a new plan. He forms this giant chunk of ice in the air and slams it right down on the golems, crushing them flat. Abel can't believe what he's seeing, says he's never even heard of a spell like that. Ryo shrugs and drops a couple more ice blocks till the rest of the golems are done for. After the dust settles, they find one golem still kicking. It's got a big shiny magic stone inside. Abel says that thing's worth a fortune. Ryo wants to dig out the rest from the others too, but they're all buried under ice and he ain't about to melt through it all. Either he's too lazy or he's just not in the mood. They keep walking till they stumble on this massive beast. Looks like a weird mix between a croc and a hippo. Abel calls it a behemoth, says it's one of those rare monsters you only hear about. Ryo's ready to go after it, but Abel shuts that down real quick, says taking on a behemoth is suicide. Right then, a pack of wyverns swoop in, and Ryo gets all fired up thinking they're about to watch some monster versus monster action. The wyverns start hurling magic-charged rocks at the behemoth, but the damn thing lets out a roar so strong it cancels their spells and knocks them straight out of the sky. Ryo figures it used some kind of magic cancel move. Later that night while eating, Abel brings it up again, says he's only ever heard of magic getting cancelled inside certain dungeon traps. That catches Ryo's interest fast. Abel mentions there's a dungeon in the city of Loon where they're heading, and Ryo gets all fired up. Pissed he didn't say anything earlier, he stares him down like he's hiding more secrets. Abel tries to shift the convo, asks if Ryo even knows about dwarves and elves, but Ryo just tells him to spill everything he's got. A few days roll by, and they finally reach a mountain range. Ryo says they'll probably hit some kind of human settlement once they make it past the mountains. Abel glances at him, wondering how the hell he knows that. Ryo debates telling him about the dragon he met who laid out the whole world map for him. But in the end, he keeps his mouth shut and throws out some vague line about it being knowledge regular folks wouldn't get. Not long after, they hear this strange ass noise echoing through the sky, and both of them tense up, ready to scrap. That is, until a massive griffin swoops down from the clouds. The second they lay eyes on it, both of them damn near panic. Abel starts spiraling into a full-blown breakdown, but Ryo thinks fast and hurls a slab of meat into the air. Abel copies him without even thinking, and the griffin scoops up both chunks before soaring off like nothing happened. Once it's gone, they let out a shaky breath, both knowing that if it had decided to attack, they wouldn't have lasted a second. As they keep moving, Abel brings up how no one's seen creatures like behemoths or griffins for over a century. He figures the tall mountain range must have kept them away from human territory all this time. That sparks something in Ryo's memory. The wyverns they saw earlier had flown in from the north, meaning their nests gotta be close. Turns out he's right again. They stumble across a group of wyverns feasting on some poor beast. Ryo's ready to throw hands, but Abel tells him those things usually take a whole squad of at least 20 pros to take down. Ryo says they won't always be able to avoid a fight and asks if things would be easier if the wyverns couldn't fly. Abel says hell yeah, ground them and he'll finish the job up close. That's all Ryo needs to hear. He steps forward and throws out some dramatic fake chant before launching 4 ice lances straight into the wyvern's wings, pinning them to the dirt. Abel doesn't waste the opportunity, goes in swinging and finishes the job. But 2 more wyverns drop in out of nowhere. Ryo locks them down too, this time without chanting a single word. That makes Abel raise an eyebrow, clearly suspicious, but he lets it go for now. They scoop up the magic stones from the fallen wyverns and keep pushing north. They finally make it past the mountain range and step into the green hills, where Abel's taken aback that they not only handled wyverns but scored a ton of magic stones that'll bring in serious money once they hit the Empire. That's when Ryo suddenly wonders which country they're even headed to, saying he's fine with anything as long as it's not the Debuhi Empire. Abel tells him the Debuhi place is further north, which makes Ryo let out a breath of relief. Abel raises an eyebrow and asks if Ryo's got some kind of beef with them. Ryo says he's cool with the people and all, but the name is just way too cringe for him to deal with. Abel finds that reaction pretty weird, but whatever. Ryo then spots a road up ahead, and when he sees it runs from east to west, Abel realizes the mountain range they crossed wasn't your average bunch of rocks. Ryo notices he's thinking hard and tries to ask about it, but Abel brushes it off and points out that the road should lead them to the nearest town. Ryo lights up at the idea of finally sleeping in a real bed, and Abel tells him the town food's worth trying too. By nightfall, they reach the place, grab a meal at the inn, and Abel brings up the guild. He tells Ryo to register with the Adventurers Guild since the license works as ID, and it'll save him the tax when entering new cities. He reminds him he had to cover the entry fee with a silver coin, and Ryo claps back, asking if he's planning to log every coin he drops for a friend. That gets Abel a little embarrassed, but he keeps the lecture going. He explains how joining the guild means they'll buy monster loot and magic stones from him at a decent price, since only alchemists know how to work that stuff right. Ryo gets curious and wants to ask more, but the waitress shows up with his food, cutting him off, and when he sees what's on the plate, he freezes. He stares at the plate of curry, stunned it even exists here, because even in isekai anime, the hero has to go through hell and back to craft a good one. He was kinda looking forward to that journey too, but this one smells perfect, tastes just as rich and nostalgic as the one he had back in Japan. Before he knows it, the plate's clean, and he's ordering more without hesitation. The next morning, Ryo won't shut up about the curry, going on and on about how damn good it was, teasing Abel for hiding such gems from him. He jokingly tells him to spill all his secrets, which freaks Abel out for a second, though Ryo's just hoping he'll talk about the best dessert spots in town. Abel nervously says he's not into sweets and walks off, leaving Ryo wondering why he's acting so weird. They get back on the road, and before long, they arrive at Lune, a town surrounded by golden wheat fields. As they approach the gate, a guard named Nimmer spots Abel and nearly freaks out, saying he was reported missing months ago. Abel brushes it off, saying a lot happened, but he's back thanks to Ryo. Nimmer shakes Ryo's hand with genuine gratitude before pulling Abel aside to catch up. Once inside, Abel suggests they head straight to the guild. With Abel vouching for him, Ryo can skip some ranks right out the gate. Normally, newbies start at F rank, but if someone B rank or higher recommends them, they can jump to D rank from the start. Ryo nods, clearly interested. At the guild, the moment Abel steps in, the whole place lights up. Everyone rushes over like he's some kind of damn hero. Ryo's happy for him, seeing how loved he is, so he steps out for a breather, figuring Abel deserves this moment. While wandering outside, Ryo suddenly bumps into an elf girl. He's drawn in by her sharp ears and pretty face, but she's eyeing him just as much, focused on his outfit. She recognizes the coat he's wearing, saying it belongs to the Fairy King, and assumes the king must think highly of Ryo to gift him something like that. He has no clue what she's talking about, but before he can ask, she says she's in a rush and hopes they meet again, then disappears down the street. Ryo stands there frozen, trying to make sense of what the hell just happened. When Abel steps out to get him, he drags him back inside and proudly introduces him as the guy who saved his life. The others start thanking Ryo left and right, and for once, he doesn't mind being the center of attention. Right after that, Abel brings Ryo to the front desk and tells the receptionist to register him as a D-rank adventurer under his recommendation. The receptionist freezes for a second, shocked that someone from Abel's squad is vouching for another person, since that's never happened before. Abel says Ryo's not your average guy, and this one's different. The receptionist explains that even with a recommendation, Ryo still needs to prove his strength before getting the rank. Abel nods and says he'll talk to the guildmaster about that directly. They're asked to wait, and a moment later, the door slams open and the guildmaster Hugh storms in all dramatic, completely fired up the second he hears Abel's back. Abel quickly introduces Ryo and says he wants him to take the rank-up exam. Hugh says they can't just bump someone up without testing their strength, but Abel hits him with a straight face and says Ryo's even stronger than him. Hugh nearly laughs in disbelief till Abel drops the bag of magic stones on the table. Hugh stares at the pile and loses his damn mind. That much magic means they didn't just fight one or two wyverns. They cleared out enough to wipe a kingdom off the map. Abel casually tells him not to panic, since they hunted them all south of the Malefic Mountains, so the danger's already dealt with. Ryo gets curious about that mountain's name, wondering if it means anything, and Hugh's reaction says it all. He says no one comes back after crossing the Malefic Range, not even top-tier adventurers unless they've got a damn good reason. The idea that Ryo and Abel made it through is unreal to him, and without wasting another second, he bumps Ryo's rank up on the spot. Right then, Abel's old crew barges in, and things get emotional fast. They'd pretty much given up hope of ever seeing him again. Hugh gives them space to reunite while he steps out with Ryo to finish the registration. As they walk, Abel calls out and tells Ryo to wait for him at the front desk after he's done, saying he's got something special to show him. Once that's settled, Hugh leads Ryo to his office, telling him that Abel's crew, the Crimson Sword, is one of the strongest and most well-known parties they've got. Ryo's not shocked or anything, but he's kinda wondering if jumping straight to D rank is really fair. Hugh gets it, but says he's known Abel long enough to know that no way in hell could he solo a wyvern, which means Ryo clearly helped in that fight, and that alone earns him the rank. Right then, the receptionist shows up with everything needed to start the formal registration, and Hugh dips out, grumbling about the stack of paperwork on his desk. The receptionist Nina greets Ryo with a smile and starts walking him through the basics. She says that for the first 300 days, he can crash at the guild lodgings, but after that, he's got to figure out a new place to stay. Then she tells him there's a dungeon exploration course the guild runs for newbies, and Ryo doesn't even hesitate, signs up right away. She tells him to show up at the meeting hall 2 days later at 9 in the morning. That part catches him off guard, and he blurts out that they actually use clocks here. Nina just smiles and moves on to the real deal. She points to the crystal device in front of him and tells him to press his hand on it. Ryo follows her lead, and the crystal lights up, scanning his biometrics and transferring it to the metal plate on top. That little slab becomes his official guild card. Nina hands it to him and congratulates him on becoming a full-fledged member. Then they step out of the office. Abel's waiting and says he wants to treat Ryo to some new clothes and maybe a staff, calling it his reward for sticking with him this far. Ryo's cool with the clothes, but the staff part throws him off. Abel explains it's standard for mages, but Ryo shrugs and says he's fine without one. He can already cast magic just fine, and when it comes to close combat, he's got a sword. Abel raises a brow and asks where the hell that sword even is, and Ryo casually points to the little knife he's been carrying. That's when Abel really starts to question reality, but Ryo brushes it off, saying there's something way more important than gear right now. He needs solid info about how this world works before anything else. Not long after, he figures out that the hours, days, weeks, and months in this world run exactly like back on Earth, and they even use the metric system to measure stuff. At this point, he's convinced someone from Earth must have shown up way back and flipped the whole setup, which explains all the familiar things around here. Right then, Abel shows up from the store after covering what Ryo bought, then tells him the real fun hasn't even started yet. He drags him to a massive impact with his guild buddies, all throwing a party for his safe return. They go hard all night, and by morning, Nina's gotta pull Ryo out to show him where he'll be staying. She brings him to a room already housing 2 rookie adventurers. The brown-haired guy calls himself Mills, and the blonde one's Ito. They welcome him in, and once Nina bounces, Mills starts going on about how into her he is. Ito tells him to quit dreaming about girls way out of his league, then shifts the convo to ask Ryo about the guild lodgings. Before long, Nina swings back in with another new recruit tagging behind. The kid nervously says his name's Ammon. He looks pretty young, so they ask his age, and he says he's 16. His parents just passed, so he's diving into adventuring to survive. Nina tells them to make him feel at home and tells Ryo to meet her in the hall with Ammon the next day. Meanwhile, Abel's filling in his crew on what he's seen Ryo pull off using magic with no staff, freezing wyverns, and wiping things out with ice. One of them, Lynn, ain't buying it. She starts dropping logic about how magic doesn't work like that with range and placement. But Abel swears that's exactly how it went down. He even brings up how Ryo took out rock golems using blocks of ice, which Lynn flat out says should be impossible. Then Rihia, another teammate, chimes in, saying there's only one person who ever showed that kind of power, the Inferno Magician. But that name's mostly a bunch of rumors since no one alive saw them in action. Some of them start getting nervous, wondering if Ryo's that strong. What if he flips sides or backs the Empire? Abel shuts that down quick, saying there's no way, since Ryo straight up hates the name Debuhi Empire too much to ever support it. Back in the room, Ryo's cracking jokes with his new crew, thinking how wild life's gotten, but it honestly feels good. A couple days later, Ryo and Ammon finally finish their dungeon speedrun bootcamp for newbies, and their instructor announces they'll hit up the dungeon's first floor this afternoon. Ammon is already panicking at the thought of his first real dungeon run, but Ryo tells him to chill the hell out, because if he stays tense like this, he'll just tire himself out before they even step inside. The instructor then turns to the group, asking if anyone still needs something clarified, and Ryo immediately asks whether adventurers can warp directly to floors they've cleared before. The instructor is clearly surprised by the question, since normally only seasoned dungeon crawlers would know to ask about that. He goes on to explain that while some dungeons down south have built-in warp points between checkpoints, sadly Loon's dungeon isn't one of those fancy places with special perks. After that, the instructor leads all the rookies straight to the dungeon, which happens to sit smack dab in the city's center. He mentions that the whole city was literally built around the dungeon itself, adding that every few years monster numbers inside suddenly spike, sometimes even sending monsters flooding to the surface. He goes on to reassure the nervous rookies by explaining how the huge walls around the dungeon exist solely to protect regular citizens from monster outbreaks, and quickly adds there's no need to worry about any monster waves popping off anytime soon. Not much later, the group reaches the beginner-friendly first floor of the dungeon, which luckily doesn't hold any seriously nasty creatures. The instructor gives them the okay to explore freely, but makes sure they stay near the entrance. Ryo immediately teams up with Ammon, and moments later he senses something coming their way. He tells Ammon to get ready to attack while he takes care of pinning down whatever approaches, and Ammon nervously draws his sword. Soon enough, a monster ant pops into view, and Ryo instantly recognizes it as a soldier ant from the guidebook he's been studying. He instructs Ammon to target its neck while he traps it firmly using ice spears. Ryo perfectly pins the monster flat against the ground, allowing Ammon to slice cleanly through its neck, earning himself his first ever kill. Ammon goes crazy excited over this success, and Ryo quickly retrieves the ant's magic stone as a trophy marking their first official victory. That evening, they have dinner alongside their roommates who insist on throwing a mini celebration for their successful first dungeon run. Their roommates seem genuinely impressed that the duo managed to handle a soldier ant right out of the gate, but Ammon modestly insists he merely delivered the final strike after Ryo had the ant completely locked down. He then enthusiastically mentions how eager he is to get back to the dungeon tomorrow, although he openly admits he's still feeling pretty uneasy about the idea of trying to explore alone. Ryo offers to go along since he's also itching to check out the dungeon down to the third floor, saying it's shady as hell that they ran into a tougher monster from a lower level roaming around on the first, especially after their instructor made that sound like it rarely ever happens. Ito joins in, mentioning he's heard some recent gossip about soldier ants popping up around floors 1 and 2 lately, and none of the boys have a clue what the hell that's about. Right then, Abel casually strolls in and explains that soldier ants can dig tunnels to climb up from deeper levels. Nils and Ito completely freak the hell out, realizing the town's #1 adventurer just appeared in front of them out of nowhere. Ryo as usual just greets his buddy casually, giving zero craps about Abel's fame. Abel teases him by asking the guys to watch over Ryo since he seriously lacks common sense. Nils jumps straight up, saluting Abel with maximum enthusiasm and blurting out that he's his biggest fan. He passionately announces his ultimate dream of becoming a legendary adventurer just like Abel someday. Eagerly asking for the honor of shaking his golden hand, Abel gladly gives him that handshake, advising Nils with a smile to chase his dreams, but reminds him seriously that surviving should always stay top priority. Ryo bluntly asks Abel why he's hanging around here at this hour, and Abel replies he literally just got back from his latest mission. Before Abel can even finish speaking, his entire party suddenly storms in, the girls clearly pissed that Abel came here instead of reporting straight to the guildmaster like he's supposed to. Abel tries desperately explaining he was only giving some rookie adventurers helpful tips, but Lynn isn't buying his crap at all and instantly orders Warren to drag his ass out of there. Warren effortlessly hoists Abel onto his back while Abel starts whining exactly like a damn toddler. Meanwhile, Lynn suddenly shoots Ryo a sharp, jealous stare. Ryo awkwardly asks what the hell she wants, prompting the priestess Rihya to quickly snap Lynn out of it and politely apologize to Ryo for their rude interruption. As they leave, Ito and Nils totally lose their minds fanboying over Abel's party. But Ryo honestly can't wrap his head around why everyone thinks that Crew of Clowns is so amazing. At the same moment, Rihya gently scolds Lynn for glaring at Ryo in public. But Lin insists she was simply curious because Abel never shuts up about Ryo's magic lately. Rihya admits she's also interested to finally see Ryo's real abilities in action, and Abel reassures them all they'll get their chance very soon. Next day, Ryo and Ammon go back into the dungeon, this time running into a pack of monster dogs. Ryo easily pins down all the beasts again with his ice spears, while Ammon impressively shows off his sword moves by personally cutting down a couple of the monsters himself. Later during their short break, Ryo comments that Ammon's sword style weirdly reminds him of Abel's technique. Ammon clarifies he learned swordplay from some old dude named Kiro, who trained at a famous swordsmanship academy back in the capital. Hearing that, Ryo immediately figures Abel must have trained under that same academy, and he seriously sees real potential in Ammon now, believing the kid might genuinely become a ridiculously strong swordsman someday. Ammon's pretty impressed Ryo knows so much about swordsmanship despite mainly being a mage. Ryo just shrugs it off, casually mentioning he did some training with an instructor for a bit before eventually figuring out his own fighting style. He notes that Ammon's current sword technique looks exhausting as hell physically, though it's also super reliable, suggesting he just needs to boost his stamina. Ryo recalls Abel getting up at sunrise every single morning during their travels to practice sword forms, pointing out that even talented guys gotta bust their ass to improve. Ammon instantly gets hyped up by this, promising he'll work even harder to become strong, and Ryo gives an approving nod. Next morning, Ryo heads over to the library and is blown away by how freaking huge the place is. He asks the librarian where he can find some books about alchemy, and she leads him to shelves filled with beginner manuals. Overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices, Ryo figures he needs fresh air to clear his head. But just as he steps out, everything suddenly turns pitch black as a total solar eclipse covers the entire city in darkness. Ryo stares up at the sky in disbelief, barely able to grasp what's happening around him. Moments later, he realizes something weird as hell went down. Everyone around him completely vanished, leaving him all alone in a creepy, unsettling silence. Suddenly, he senses danger rushing at him from behind. Trusting pure instinct, Ryo spins quickly, summoning a solid ice barrier just in time to deflect a powerful burst of flames. He tries to figure out who just tried roasting him alive. Then he notices a terrifyingly attractive demon lady strolling toward him, looking like she stepped right off a Hollywood action set. She grins confidently, clearly amused to find a random human stuck inside her domain, definitely planning to kick his ass. Ryo immediately realizes he's facing a genuine demon, and he's absolutely positive she's the strongest opponent he's encountered since arriving here. He briefly considers running for it, but quickly sees there's no realistic way he'll escape from this weird dimension, no matter how fast he moves. Gritting his teeth, he accepts fighting is his only option now. Instantly, he creates multiple ice barriers surrounding himself just as the demon unleashes another devastating wave of fire. His barriers hold firm against the flames, but then the demon suddenly changes strategy, firing off an invisible wind bullet that effortlessly pierces Ryo's ice shields, only to harmlessly bounce off his robe. The fiery demon lady stares in disbelief, completely confused how a human's cloak just blocked her attack. But after taking a closer look, she quickly recognizes Ryo's cloak as the Fairy King's robe, realizing immediately he must be a mage with real power to own something that rare and survive her attacks. She decides she'll simply cut him down with her sword instead of wasting time with magic. Meanwhile, Ryo knows he's in deep trouble if she gets close, and prepares himself mentally for the toughest fight of his life. Ryo summons his ice sword too, bracing himself defensively as the fierce demoness rushes him with full force. She's insanely fast, forcing him into frantic evasive moves as one vicious slash barely misses his face. Spotting an opening, he strikes back with a hailstorm of frozen spears, but she effortlessly sidesteps every projectile, too busy having fun to notice the solar eclipse slowly fading. At the same moment, Ryo figures she's enhancing her speed using wind magic. Then she suddenly launches herself straight at him, trying to end the fight in one deadly blow. But Ryo easily deflects her strike, realizing that despite her blazing speed, her sword skills aren't nearly as brutal as those hellish lessons he went through fighting that headless knight. The demon pauses in shock, genuinely amazed by Ryo's abilities, demanding to know who the hell this human is to wield both the Fairy King's robe and blade. Losing patience, she forms a blazing fireball to burn him alive, but Ryo instantly cancels it out with a timely ice spear. That totally enraged her. The demoness quickly decides she has to take him out fast, realizing Ryo will become a major pain if she drags this fight out too long. She goes into a fierce offensive mode, but Ryo stays calm, smoothly parrying every aggressive strike. Spotting a brief gap, he counters sharply, knocking the demon completely off balance. Immediately seizing this chance, He unleashes a devastating wave of sharpened ice spikes, aiming to finish her. She quickly shields herself with blistering flames, melting away his attack before it hits her. But as Ryo's relentless assault ramps up, she's forced to summon thick stone walls as extra defense. Ryo adapts fast though, changing his approach by launching slicing jets of high-pressure water, effortlessly cutting through the rocky barriers and landing multiple hits on her. Stunned that Ryo's magic is actually injuring her, the demoness is luckily saved by the dense smoke clouding his vision. Sensing a perfect opportunity, Ryo charges forward ready to land the finishing blow. But she desperately leaps ahead, blocking his strike head-on. Their swords clash violently midair, but Ryo's momentarily distracted when he sees the demoness's injuries rapidly regenerating in front of him. She instantly takes advantage of this brief hesitation to land a powerful hit, smashing him into a nearby building. Preparing to end him for good, she suddenly feels tiny water droplets falling on her skin. Confused, she glances upward just in time to see a scalding raindrop landing on her face, hotter than freaking boiling water. She shrieks in pure agony, immediately covering herself inside a protective stone cocoon, desperately waiting for the burning rainfall to stop. Meanwhile, Ryo slowly gets back on his feet, calmly touching down again, already prepared to unleash his next move. Without warning, the demoness explodes into a furious blaze, violently blowing apart everything nearby. She slowly marches towards Ryo, murderous intent radiating off her. But right then the eclipse starts fading away. Sunlight brushes against her blade, shattering it into nothing. She stops dead in her tracks, clicking her tongue in frustration, bitterly stating they'll have to settle things another time. Ryo mocks her, telling her to hurry up and piss off already. Surprisingly unbothered by his attitude, the demon casually introduces herself as Leonore and asks for his name. Ryo reluctantly responds, clearly signaling he couldn't care less about chatting with some demon. Leonore is intrigued that Ryo obviously knows exactly what she is, making her instantly regret screwing around instead of killing him outright. She warns that someday they'll have their rematch, though another demon might cross his path first, telling him not to die to some weakling, because when she returns, she'll be far stronger and definitely won't hesitate to finish his ass off. A chill runs down Ryo's spine hearing that, but just then, the eclipse disappears completely, and reality snaps back to normal, leaving no trace of their chaotic fight. Feeling shaken, Ryo decides to just buy his books quickly and get some rest. He heads straight to the bank, cashing in on the hefty stack of coins earned from selling all those wyvern magic stones. Afterwards, he swings by the dorm hoping to check in with his roommates, but when he realizes they're not around, he's just about to leave when he spots them being cornered and harassed by a group of douchebag adventurers. Nils and Ito curse at the group's leader, a big jerk named Dan, for cowardly ambushing them while they're still injured. But Dan sneers back that monsters won't show them any pity either when they inevitably die in the dungeon. Suddenly, Dan's cronies drop unconscious as Ryo quietly knocks them out from behind, calmly telling Dan he's absolutely right. But maybe he should take his own advice sometime. He casually taunts Dan, asking if he's planning to run now that his buddies are out cold. Enraged, Dan recklessly charges Ryo, but he effortlessly sidesteps him, smashing his sword handle directly into Dan's gut, forcing the bully to puke out what's left of his breakfast. Ryo immediately shifts his attention to healing his injured friends, lightly scolding them about needing to toughen up so no weak-ass punks can catch them off guard again. But he decides that right now they all deserve a proper break. Together they hit up the public baths, where Ito, their resident priest, heals the nasty wound left by Leonore's wind bullet. As everyone sits soaking comfortably in the hot water, curiosity finally gets the best of them, and they start bombarding Ryo with questions about who the hell could actually injure someone as strong as him. Ryo briefly considers mentioning the demon, but quickly dismisses the idea, deciding relaxation is their priority right now. Everything else can wait. Not long after that, Ammon, Nils, and Ito start heading into the dungeon as a team. While Nils and Ammon handle the goblins head-on, Ito sticks to the back, ready to patch them up whenever they take a hit. As Nils grabs the magic stones from the fallen goblins, Ito focuses on healing Ammon, and the two of them start chatting about how close that last encounter was. Nils says they should pull back before it gets worse, and Ito agrees there's no way they were supposed to run into goblin archers on the 4th floor. Meanwhile, Ammon still wants to hunt a few more monsters and make some quick cash. But Nils remembers what Abel told them about not throwing their lives away for something that doesn't matter. So they turn back and head to the surface, which ends up being the smartest move they could have made, because just a few levels deeper, another group of adventurers gets wiped out by a massive beast they never saw coming. Back on the surface, Ryo's still thinking about how insane Leonore's magic was, but at least he could keep up with her casting speed. Tells himself he needs to push his strengths even further and fix his weak spots. That brings up a sore one. He couldn't match her speed yesterday, not even close. He gets a little jealous of her wind magic, but instead of sitting with that, he shakes it off and starts thinking of his own way forward. He figures he could use a water jet to launch himself, and while he's tried that underwater before, he's not sure it'll work on land. He starts by forming an icy platform ahead of him, then blasts hundreds of tiny water jets from different points along his back to push himself forward. But he barely moves faster than an old grandma at a crosswalk, clearly pissed off, but calls it a work in progress, which honestly describes his mental state too. After that, he heads to the library to dig into anything he can find about demons and alchemy. Around the same time, Lynn, the low-ranking wizard from Abel's party, is there too. She's flipping through records, trying to find anything about a spell that can make an ice wall strong enough to crush a golem, but nothing's turning up. That actually makes her kind of happy, wants to believe Ryo's a fraud who tricked Abel, because in her mind only the continent's strongest wizard could pull off something like that. Right as she's putting the book back on the shelf, spots the elf girl Sarah. The two of them share a quick hello and chat for a bit before Sarah remembers she's got to meet up with her group and walks off. Back at the guild, Ammon and the others return, and the moment Nils sees the receptionist Nina, he starts stuttering like a total simp. Ito smacks him on the head and steps in, telling Nina they found goblin archers on the 5th floor, which isn't supposed to happen, and that's why they rushed back to report it. Nina takes a look at the magic stones, confirms them, then hurries off to inform the guildmaster, thanking the boys for bringing in something this important. Hugh's not too happy when he hears that goblins showed up on the 5th floor. Since they're the kind of monsters that usually stay below the 10th, figures this might be the start of something bigger. So he tells Nina to call in every party ranked B and above. She lets him know that only 2 high-ranking parties are in town right now, Abel's Crimson Sword and the White Brigade. Not long after that, Abel and his crew head to Hugh's office, and he's already annoyed because it means he'll have to work with the White Brigade, and he can't stand their leader. The girls tell him to quit whining, and he takes a deep breath to calm himself before walking in. Phelps from the White Brigade is already there, and Abel has to fight the urge to grimace the second he sees him. Once they both sit, Hugh lays it out for them. Goblins on the 5th floor. Info's solid. Says Crimson Sword and White Brigade both need to head into the dungeon and check for signs of a monster outbreak. Last time it happened was 10 years ago, so even if it feels early, it's still a possibility. To get them moving, he offers 100 gold up front and another 200 once the job's done. That's when Abel asks if they're just supposed to investigate and nothing more. Hugh nods, and then Phelps jumps in, wanting to know what they're supposed to do if it's already started. Hugh tells them plain and simple, if it's an outbreak, get out fast. They'll seal off the dungeon and call in the knights to handle the monsters. Says he already alerted the Lord and the knight headquarters, because if this thing's real, they've got to be ready. After that, he asks both groups if they're up for the mission, and they agree without hesitation. The next morning, Ryo's already up and getting ready to head out to the Northern Library by the time his roommates start waking. He tells them he's planning to dive deeper into alchemy and heard that place has books on more advanced stuff. Ito nods, says that's true, and that D-rank adventurers and above can access it without any problem. Ammon chimes in, says he's heard whispers about forbidden books being stored there too. That gets Ryo fired up, but Ito quickly brings him back down, telling him those are off limits unless you're at least B rank. They all wish him luck on his little knowledge quest while they start gearing up for another round in the dungeon. By the time Ryo reaches the Northern Library, he already loves the vibe, starts scanning the shelves for the right books, and jokes to himself that if he straight up asked someone where the demon books are, they'd probably lose it. As he makes his way up the stairs to the 1st floor, his eyes land on someone unexpected, Sarah the elf girl, and he's instantly captivated. While that's happening, Hugh and the 2 elite parties finally arrive at the dungeon gates. Right when they're about to push the doors open, Abel stops him cold, says something feels off, tells Lynn to use her wind magic to check the 1st floor, and sure enough, she finds hundreds of monsters waiting just beyond the entrance. That's all the confirmation they need. The outbreak's already started. Hugh immediately orders everyone to fall back and contact both the knights and the guild. Back at the guild, Nils and the others see a notice saying the dungeon's been sealed off, and they figure it's because of those goblin archers they ran into. But before they can say much else, a man bursts in yelling that a monster outbreak's begun, and all adventurers are being sent to the dungeon walls to help hold the line. Meanwhile, Ryo and Sarah are still staring at each other like nothing's happening out there. She finally breaks the silence, says it's funny they're meeting again. Then after quick introductions, she asks if he's hunting for something specific. Ryo almost blurts out he's looking into demons, but switches it up saying he wants to study alchemy to create golems. Sarah looks impressed. Creating golems isn't exactly beginner level stuff, tells him there aren't any books that focus directly on that, but she offers to show him the ones that'll help the most. Says she knows the library inside and out. They talk a bit about books and adventuring along the way. And that's when Sarah mentions she's actually the only member of a B rank party called Wind. Ryo remembers someone told him there's only one elf in the whole city, and she nods, says elves don't usually hang around with humans, but she's always been the odd one out. Elsewhere, the adventurers from the entire city have gathered at the dungeon walls, and it doesn't take long before the monsters break straight through the heavy gate. Then Hugh yells out for everyone to hit them with spells and arrows, kicking off a brutal fight against the goblin swarm. The knights arrive a few minutes later and start pushing the monsters back, and for a while it looks like they've got control. But Hugh's frowning. There are way more monsters this time than what he saw in the last outbreak. As the fight drags on, Abel's group runs out of arrows. That's when Nils shows up with a whole damn barrel of them. Panting along with a message from Hugh, his party's supposed to handle the boss monster once the wave ends. Not long after that, most of the goblins are down, and Hugh gives the order. Abel and Phelps are to lead their parties into the next phase, so they jump down from the wall, and Lynn uses her wind magic to slow their fall. The moment they land, they charge through the stragglers and head for the gate, stopping there to wait for the boss. That's when a goblin general steps out. They figure it's over once he's taken down. But then two more follow behind him, and Abel realizes this ain't a normal fight. He tells them they've got a goblin king on their hands, and if those generals stick around, he's gonna be even worse. So they split the work. Abel and Phelps each take one, while Lynn and Rihia handle the third. They jump into the battle, and Abel cuts off his opponent's arms, but right then he spots something terrifying, a towering shadow at the dungeon's mouth. Yells for everyone to get down. A split second later, a massive wind slash tears out of the gate, slicing through all three goblin generals like they were nothing. Suddenly everyone freezes. That kind of power, that brutality, no way this is a regular boss. But Abel and Phelps both know damn well they're the only ones who can face this thing. They charge in together, but their blades don't even scratch his armor. Without warning, Abel darts straight at him and activates his ghost skill to dodge the counterattack. He gets in close, drives a strike straight toward the king's heart, but doesn't finish him off. The goblin king goes in for the attack, but Abel tells Lynn to finish the job right as he vanishes again. Her wind spears shoot straight through him and nail the goblin king, dropping him on the spot. Everyone breathes out, thinking it's finally over, but deep inside that dungeon, something worse is still waiting. Everyone heads back to the guild to celebrate the win, and by the time Ryo shows up, he still cannot tell why the place is humming with celebration. At the same time, the rest are singing and laughing, while the guildmaster is buried elbow deep in paperwork because he still has to dispatch reports on the Great Monsters outbreak and run the payouts for the adventurers who helped deal with it. On top of that, researchers from the royal capital are bound to arrive to collect data on the Great Monsters outbreak, so he has to handle them too. At the same time at the party, Abel has just finished explaining everything that happened with the monsters outbreak while he was in the library, and then Abel's friends arrive. Lynn has been wanting to ask Ryo in person for a while, so she tells him she wants to know whether he can create thick ice walls at range. Ryo confirms it, and to be exact, he says he can cast up to roughly 40 meters away. It took him a long time to get the feel for it, so it is not as easy as he makes it look. Even so, Lynn has never heard of anyone throwing magic that far, so she asks if it is an original spell, and if so, she wants to know what incantation he uses to trigger it. Ryo says he will be glad to show her later, and as for the words, he just makes them up on the spot, so she can say whatever she wants. Meanwhile, Mills points out that most of the food is already gone, so if Ryo does not hurry, he will end up with nothing to eat. He excuses himself, then heads for a plate, but Lynn is still stuck on what he meant about going with the flow for incantations. Abel explains that Ryo uses spoken lines because he thinks they look cool, and he can cast without saying a word, which sounds even wilder to her than the ice walls. The next day, Nils, Ito, and Ammon gather at the guild to look for work, but they are disappointed to find the board empty. At the same time, Ryo happens to walk by, and he asks what the three of them are doing there, since they usually are out working by now. Unfortunately, after the monsters' outbreak yesterday, the dungeon was shut for inspections, so they will not be able to go in for a while. They were hoping to find a resource gathering job to get by in the meantime, but with all the items that dropped during the monsters' outbreak, there is not much demand for gathering right now. Putting their own issues aside, they ask Ryo what he is up to, so he tells them he is hunting for magic copper ore because he needs it to start learning alchemy. Ito recalls hearing that magic copper ore is crazy expensive, and Ryo says he is right, since the last shop he visited quoted 50 gold pieces for a single copper piece. Even so, the cash does not mean much to Ryo because he is loaded, but he wants to help his friends out. So he asks if they would be interested in gathering magic copper ore for him, says he is willing to pay them 4 gold coins each whether they find any ore or not, and if they do bring some back, he will buy it off them for 25 gold coins. All 3 are stunned because that is more money than they have ever seen. But Ito asks whether Ryo is really fine with paying them that much. Ryo says that if they do find copper, he will only have to pay 37 gold, which is cheaper than the 50 gold he would pay in town. So it is a good deal for him as well. At the end of the day, the math works, since they confirm that Ryo is serious about the offer. The 3 of them rush off to begin the search, and once they are gone, Ryo hears a commotion outside, so he goes to take a look. Downstairs, he sees Dan arguing with a group of knights who are basically trying to kidnap a girl in broad daylight. The girl clearly does not want to go with them, so when they start dragging her away, Dan steps in and shoves the knight to loosen his grip on the girl. She is free now, but the trouble is worse, because the knights still outnumber Dan 4-1, and they are armed with swords, so there is no way he can win this fight. The group's leader gets ready to teach Dan a lesson for daring to challenge a knight, but as soon as he takes a step, he trips and smacks the ground. Everyone watching is confused, since there is nothing near the knight's boots. What the hell? Faces twist in confusion, and the knight refuses to swallow the embarrassment of tripping over his own feet, so he accuses Dan of doing something to him. However, as he tries to stand back up, he stumbles again. Not long after, Phelps arrives, and he is appalled by the stunt these so-called knights have pulled. At first, they try to lean on him, since in the city they outrank adventurers on paper, so the scare tactics bounce off Phelps, because while he is an adventurer, he is also a noble, and he stands his ground. His full name is Phelps Heinlein, and the second the knights hear he is Heinlein, they realize they screwed up. Phelps's father, Alexis Heinlein, was the former captain of the Royal Knights, which means the Heinlein family holds real sway over the order, so Phelps could probably have them sacked on a whim if he wanted. If he had been there while they tried to kidnap the girl, he would not have thought twice about ending them. Right now, he only knows they were about to gang up on Dan, so he rips into them for disgracing knighthood and tells them to get lost before he changes his mind about letting them go. Once they clear out, Phelps glances up at Ryo because he noticed what Ryo did earlier, even from the edge of the crowd. He had already heard from Abel that Ryo's magic was ridiculous, but seeing it with his own eyes still blows him away, since he has never watched anyone fire off spells at that kind of distance, or with that kind of precision. Of course, he does not plan to tell anyone that Ryo is the one who made those royal knights slip, since that would be a hassle for Ryo to deal with. But he genuinely appreciates the help, because he feels personally responsible for letting trash like that wear royal colors in the first place. Later that night, Ryo is grabbing lunch at the tavern when Abel drops in, but it is rare to see Abel without the rest of his party. So Ryo immediately figures he must be heading for the red light district after this. Abel panics and begs Ryo to quit talking before people overhear, and using pure deductive genius, Ryo decides that since Abel does not want folks thinking he is the type to hit the pleasure district, he must have his eyes on someone. At first, he thought it was Lynn, but Abel says he is wrong, because Lynn already has a crush on Warren. So with that settled, Ryo concludes Abel is crushing on Rihia, and Abel gets even more frantic trying to deny it, which pretty much confirms Ryo's hunch on the spot. Abel's crush aside, Ryo asks what he is really doing out on his own tonight, and technically Abel is headed for the pleasure district, but not for the usual reasons, and since Ryo is here, Abel could use a hand. One of the dungeon investigators sent to the Loon dungeon is an old friend of Abel, and the crown assigned royal knights to guard him while he is in town. Unfortunately, those guards are the same ones Ryo spotted earlier, and there are plenty of reports of them using their badges to commit ugly crimes. Abel heard they were in the pleasure district tonight, so trouble is only a matter of time, and he wants to shut them down before anyone gets hurt. As they walk, Ryo notices 2 adventurers talking. Yet he has met every adventurer in this town by now, and he does not recognize those 2. Abel says it is common for adventurers to travel to Loon to try the dungeon. However, the dungeon is closed right now, which makes the pair suspicious, especially since they are dressed in black and slip away the moment they realize Ryo and Abel are watching. A little later, Ryo and Abel deliberately cut down a dark alley, and within moments those shady adventurers spring an ambush. But Ryo saw it coming, then drops ice on their heads and floors the lot of them. To be honest, that was way easier than he expected. Even so, they still have no idea what these guys were planning, so they will hand them over to the guards for interrogation. Elsewhere in the pleasure district, Phelps walks alone while the knights creep up behind him. Their leader is still burning with embarrassment over Phelps getting in his way earlier, and the plan is to kill him tonight. However, just as they reach for their swords, every limb locks and not one of them can move. It was a trap set by Phelps from the start, because now that he understands how rotten this squad truly is, he would be a failure of a noble if he let them carry on. He had Shenna tag them with paralytic needles, and with the lot frozen in place he calls on her fire magic, reducing them to extra crispy chicken nuggets until nothing remains. The next day, the research team from the capital rolls into town, and just as the guildmaster predicted, they start trouble right away by claiming the entire day's food supply for their investigation. On top of that, Clive demands that Hugh reopen the dungeon and assign adventurers as protection while they work. Hugh says that is unreasonable, because no one knows what state the dungeon is in, and it could be seriously dangerous. However, Clive reminds him he was given full authority over the investigation, so Hugh has to follow orders. The advisor, Harold, apologizes to Hugh for Clive's behavior and promises to replace the supplies taken from the town, which Hugh appreciates. Yet Clive still refuses to drop the push to reopen and head in. In the end, Hugh gives ground and says he is willing to open the dungeon for Clive, but he makes it crystal clear that if anything goes wrong, neither Hugh nor the city of Lune will be responsible. It all lands on Clive's head. Clive starts to second-guess himself now that the blame would be his, but after all the arguing he cannot back down, so he accepts Hugh's terms. Even so, they still need adventurers to escort the research team. Soon after, Ryo is heading to the cafeteria when a girl runs out and asks him to show her the way to the Adventurers Guild. Ryo was on his way to lunch, but since she needs help he guides her to the guild. The girl's name is Natalie Schwarzkopf, and she is here to deliver a letter requesting Abel's party to defend the investigation team in the dungeon. Ryo is amazed that a team is being sent down there while the dungeon is closed, and Abel says someone must have pulled strings to force Hugh to reopen it. The reason the dungeon was closed in the first place goes back decades. After a monster's outbreak, a ranked party went in to investigate and none of them returned. Even their leader, practically an S-rank superhuman, never came back. If whatever was down there could erase an S-rank, the guild would not gamble on it. So from then on it became standard to shut the dungeon whenever a monster outbreak hit. Ryo is intrigued by the story, but hunger wins, so he heads out to grab lunch, nods a quick goodbye. Once he is gone, Lynn asks if Natalie is really from the Schwarzkopf family, since they are renowned for legendary water magic. Natalie confirms it with a simple yes, so Lynn asks whether she has ever heard of magic that lets a mage raise an ice wall at a distance. Natalie says she is not sure something like that is even possible. So Abel answers that hard as it is to believe, Ryo can put up an ice wall about 40 meters away. On that note, he warns everyone here not to pick a fight with Ryo under any circumstances, and if they do end up across from him, they should just surrender, because even all together they would still lose. He also tells Natalie that if she ever needs help and cannot find the party, she should go to Ryo because he will handle it. 3 days pass, and Ryo's friends finally get back from their mission, having managed to gather 2 magic copper ores along the way. So Ryo pays them 90 gold in total on the spot, and they are thankful, because with that much coin they will not have to work for a while and can breathe. At the same time down in the dungeon, the investigation team has already reached the 7th floor in silence, but strangely they have not seen a single monster yet, so they keep moving and continue deeper. Eventually they come upon a black square set into the wall, and none of them knows what it is, since they have never seen anything like it before. Clive, however, is ecstatic, calling it a prime anomaly for analysis. He orders the crew to set up the measuring equipment so they can send data back to the surface, and once the instruments start streaming, the analysis team, including Natalie, will begin scrutinizing the feed to identify the anomaly. However, the moment Clive's team pushes the monodensity gauge through the gate, every one of them is teleported away, and the surface team loses contact at once. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this recap, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or tweaks, share them in the comments. They help me improve.